You, DJ Jazzy. And welcome everyone to our third sprint session on data and evaluation. Next slide, please. So today we're going to start with our welcome, and then we'll move into breakout discussion on all your program goals. From there, we'll move into an overview of the theory of change. We'll also have our action plan breakouts as always, followed by a second content section on program evaluation, and we'll close with wrap up and reminders. So a little housekeeping to start us off. If you could please update your participant name to include your name, your jurisdiction, and pronouns if you choose. Closed captioning has been enabled as always, and the content for this sprint will be shared on the Results Network. If you are having issues at all accessing the Results Network, please let us know in the chat or in the action plan, and we will be sure to help you. Next slide, please. So, on the Results Network, we asked you all to complete an advanced poll for today's session to help us understand where we should lean into with the content. And so we asked on data measurement, what are you most interested in hearing about? And so about half and half said developing a theory of change, and the other half said program evaluation. And that's good because for today's session, our time will be pretty much split in half between those two topics. So thank you so much for participating in that poll. And on to the next slide. So for this next section, I'm going to share a little bit about the cohort. You all have provided such rich information to us through your applications and onboarding forms, and we want you all to get a picture of who's in the room with you, some of your learning goals, and so on. And so on this first slide, we have a map of all the jurisdictions that are participating. So we have a total of 18. You can go back. Yep. We have a total of 18 sprint teams and two auditors for the sprint. On the map, you see green and blue. So the green markers are for uh, programs that are just getting started or newer, or people who are exploring. And the blue indicate programs that are already established and are seeking to expand or sustain their traditional jobs programs. And you can also see the names of the jurisdictions on the right. There's a table there. And these slides will be shared with you. And so we definitely encourage you all to use particularly this map, right, to draw connections, not only across your regions, but also across your level of implementation progress. Next slide, please. So for team makeup, um, the average team size is about 6 folks, we found. Um, and we noticed that government and nonprofit staff are the most common role among our sprint participants. Next slide, please. So for implementation progress, we noticed that um, about a quarter of teams are interested in just getting started, so they're pretty much at point A. About half are a little bit further along, right? You're exploring ideas, you're gathering your partners. We have one team that has their program approved, and they're just getting ready to launch right now. And then another 7 teams, they have existing programs that are working to expand. Next slide, please. Um, so as far as what teams are hoping to gain from the sprint experience, we found that most of you all are interested in lessons learned by other jurisdictions. So like, what are the challenges that folks have encountered and how have they addressed them? And this is good information for us because that helps us know that, okay, we need to put you all in breakout rooms to get to know each other and learn and hear from one another, or perhaps invite some of you all to be guest speakers. So look out for that. Um, Also, we found folks were really interested in securing sustainable funding, as well as implementation best practices and strengthening your local coalition. Next slide, please. So as far as level of understanding, in your onboarding form, we asked you, again, across these different dimensions, to rate your level of understanding on a 1 to 5 scale. And this is the output of that. So in the lightest green, right, that indicates like a limited understanding. And so you'll see that to the left. and then the darker green indicates significant or more advanced understanding, and that'll be towards the right. Also, all the way to the right of the slide, right, we have like an average score from the 1 to 5 that kind of tells us, okay, how far along generally is the sprint cohort on each of these topics. Again, this is really, really helpful and rich information for us as we try to understand where to lean in on the curriculum for the sessions from week to week. So what we found was that folks were, furthest along with their understanding of the benefits of transitional job programs, particularly how they advance workforce, reentry, and economic mobility. But we also saw that, folks are wanting or needing more help with securing viable funding opportunities. And so we're keeping that in mind as we move into our later sessions. And also, we see at the bottom as well, defining success metrics and measuring outcomes is something that the folks want to learn more about. And so, luckily, that is the topic for today. Next slide. Yes. So in week one, we did an overview of transitional jobs. In week two, we talked about developing transitional jobs partnerships. And today is all about data and evaluation. Next slide. So we're going to begin today's session with a quick breakout, another random breakout where you can meet folks. And we want you to discuss these three questions. What are your goals for your program? What might success, what might your success story look like? And what might your dream headline be? So one of my colleagues is going to pop those prompts into the chat so that you have them. And then from there, we're ready to move into breakout rooms. You should see a prompt shortly inviting you to join a breakout room. All right. We'll see you back in about 5 minutes, 7 minutes. I see we've reached a critical mass. Thank you all so much, and we hope that you all enjoyed that breakout session, getting to speak with your peers. And now this is the time where we want to hear what you all talked about. And so we'll invite anyone who wants to share, whether that's in the chat, or raise your hand and come off mute. Just let us know what you all discussed. Like, what are the goals for your program? What is success for you? And what might your dream headline be? Oh, we see. Oh, yes. Raised hands. Eddie, talk to us. You're on mute, unfortunately.
Eddie from Florida. Hello, everyone. I'm a Justice Impacted College student at Florida State University. Uh, I went to prison when I was 18, and now that I'm a student at Florida State, one of the challenges that we face is people who can find jobs that are flexible with their school schedule. So one of the goals I think would be to find something a job that works with people's school schedules so that they don't have to sacrifice their education, for some kind of a job, a menial job or whatever that, you know, they should be able to progress as well. And a headliner would be more than a second chance. I believe that employers should be called those that truly work with lived experience, with living wages. Those are what I call fair opportunity employers, not just a chance. So, yeah, more than a second chance.
Thank you so much, Eddie. Lacey, talk to us.
Hey guys.
Hey.
Hey. Asia and I talked about asset mapping for, well, Jackson in itself with industries and how if they're in the area, they should have sizable chunks of jobs coming from the area itself. So pulling from Jackson population, not just surrounding like Rankin County and Hines County itself. So part of that is detailing what industries are in our area. And that's kind of the easy part. But, getting down to who are they actually hiring inside the city or outside the city be kind of interesting to figure out. But it's a worthy goal because we can then ask these industries, hey, either you're pulling from our population or you're giving back to our population because you're here. You're part of the community. So that's what we were talking about.
Thank you, Lacey.
You're
Also,
welcome.
also see lots of great responses in the chat. I think we have about 1 more minute. And so let's see if we can get both Vonzella and Janelle in that 1 minute.
I'll be really quick. I just really appreciate my group as far as the work that they're doing, where I'm thinking about peer mentorship work also, like Eddie spoke up earlier. I'm an emergency medicine doctor. I work in a trauma center, and being able to maybe develop peer mentorship to have folks who experience violence or develop someone that's gone through it, have lived experiences to get them connected with some of the social resources as far as mental health or even primary care, or just learn how to do conflict management. But in my group, I learned some stakeholders that I should probably reach out to help us achieve our goals. So that's what I learned from my group. Thank you.
Thank you. And Janelle.
I will be really quick as well. My goals for the programmers to get a program started. I'm in Ohio and I'm an executive director from a workforce development board. And we are looking at ways that we can help support transitional jobs and bring it to our area. Currently, right now, we do not have it in place. So we're looking at what fits us. And our group most of us were that, but we had one individual that already had the program going, and today was graduation for him. So super excited for his program. Looking just to learn more. So no, I don't have a dream headline, but success would be just to get a program up and running and starting to help people.
You'll have one soon, I'm sure. Thank you, Janelle, and thank you all for sharing. Feel free to keep engaging in the chat. And now I will pass it to Hillary to introduce our guest speakers for today.
Yeah, thank you, DeMarcus. And I just want to say that I just really enjoyed reading everybody's dream headlines and hearing you come off and speak about your goals. Can't wait to see them all come true in real life. We're going to talk today about data and evaluation. And part of that is covering two topics: developing your theory of change and program evaluation. Developing your theory of change is important to help focus your program and clarify your goals for outcomes and measurement. Later on in the session, when we discuss program evaluation, we are going to keep things really high level. We want to meet everybody where they are, and we know that some people have established programs and some people are just starting out. But our focus is going to be discussing how you can set your program up for success from the very beginning so that you can build up to more formal avenues of evaluation in the future. Both of these topics are going to be presented by two of my amazing colleagues from CEO, and I'm excited to introduce them to you now. First, we have Noelle Drummond, who serves as our Senior Director of Learning and Impact at CEO. Her work is centered around using data to improve and grow CEO. Noelle is deeply committed to using her background in community and social psychology to drive positive change, especially through community-based participatory research methods aimed at supporting marginalized communities and improving workforce development. We also have Em O'Connor. Em is a Senior Research and Evaluation Specialist on the Learning and Impact team at CEO. Her work focuses on helping organizations use data and stakeholder feedback to strengthen programs and improve outcomes through practical, mission-driven evaluation. Em's training includes a master's in experimental psychology and a PhD in applied social and community psychology. Let's give Noelle and Em a big round of applause to welcome them, and I will turn the stage over to them now.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Hillary, for that introduction. I'm going to be taking on the theory of change portion of mine and Noelle's talks today. So I was really excited to read some of your goals that you were putting about your programs in the chat and also just hearing them because I think it's going to put you in a really great mind space for as we start to talk about what theory of change is. So keep those in the forefront of your mind because my hope is that by the end of my little session here, you'll be able to define what a theory of change is, explain what a theory of change is and why is it valuable to your organization. Identify the key components of a theory of change that really kind of drive the whole thing, bring it all together to really have it become this cohesive framework that you can operate from. And also how to reflect on the assumptions of how change actually happens in your organization. So a theory of change really should describe how exactly and what assumptions do we have about how change is happening based on what your organization's goals are. So jumping right into it, what is a theory of change? So hopefully at this point you've had some, background a little bit. I know there were some readings assigned ahead of time, so this won't be brand new, but a theory of change helps to clarify the connection between what we do and the impact we aim to achieve. It explains the logic behind how our activities are expected to create meaningful change over time, and it captures the key beliefs and assumptions that guide our work. It provides a shared vision that aligns teams and stakeholders around common goals. So it's really important to get everybody on the same page so everybody can really start to think about what is it exactly that we're going to do? How are we going to do it? And how do we hope to achieve it? And it really can serve as a primary foundation for planning, decision-making, and measuring success. Your theory of change should be something that you're kind of continually, organizationally, all going back to and thinking about, and whether or not it's currently suiting your needs. And the nice thing about a theory of change is that it's not always set in stone. It can be malleable and it can shift and change based on your organization. So I want to talk a little bit about the theory of change in terms of how a change happens. So a theory of change encourages organizations to be really intentional about how they expect change to happen. It creates alignment within the organization around a shared vision. What is the vision for your program? Who are you hoping to impact and how are you going to do it? It helps to clarify specific changes that the organization is working toward. One of the hardest things about a theory of change is that it needs to be specific while also being broad, but the specificity can really come from being really clear about what it is and what your mission is and what you want to do. It surfaces assumptions that may otherwise remain implicit or unexamined, and we'll talk about those shortly. And it keeps strategy and activities connected to your organization's mission. It supports stronger decision-making and more effective use of resources. And it provides a clear way to communicate purpose and to impact to funders, partners, staff, and the community. So the heart of a theory of change is the assumptions that your organization is making around how you're going to impact the participants that you're impacting. And a theory of change, an assumption, is a belief about how or why a change happens. And these assumptions reflect the conditions or expectations that underscore a program's approach, including factors that may be outside of the program's control. So first, this may be like the very first assumption that you're going to really be thinking about when you're thinking about assumptions around how your program is impacting participants in your program. And so this is going to be a causal assumption. So these are our beliefs about cause and effect, essentially. The idea that an action A will result in B. For example, in transitional job work, the work that we do at CEO, providing transitional jobs will help participants build the experience and resources needed to secure permanent employment. And then second, there's contextual assumptions. So contextual assumptions tend to be external environmental factors, completely outside of the direct control that must remain stable within the assumptions you're making underlying your theory of change. So for our participants, a major contextual assumption is that there will be a local labor market that is willing to hire justice impacted individuals. So there will be fair chance organizations within the current environment that our participants exist in. We don't have any control over those. They are either there or they're not. We can advocate for them. We can try really hard to get them, but ultimately that is out of the control of our organization. Third, there are operational assumptions. So these are assumptions that are internal to your organization, logistics and resources that are required to actually run the program. So for us, this means we can secure employer partners to provide transitional job opportunities to our partners. And we make the assumption that we're going to be able to do that. So just take a moment and in the chat, think about some of these assumptions, causal assumptions, contextual assumptions, operational assumptions. What kind of assumptions do you have about your organization and how your organization is impacting and creating the change that it intends to make? So you can take a moment and just think about those. And as they come in, we'll look at them and we will chat about them hopefully afterwards. We're short on time, so I can't take up too much time here, but definitely curious to hear about some of the assumptions that you all are holding about your organization and your impact. So starting to think a little bit more concretely about what components make up a theory of change. So a strong theory of change starts with a clear understanding of the needs and challenges facing the target population. It defines the long-term change or impact of the organization hopes to achieve. It describes how the activities and outcomes connect to that long-term vision. It identifies the assumptions that explain why the program components are expected to lead to change. So again, going back to those assumptions, think about that causal assumption, right? Like what components of the program are really key in making that change happen. And it clarifies the role of the organization and community in creating and sustaining change. Really great assumptions going on in the chat. So definitely look at those and see how they may or may not be relative to, what your organization is doing. So I wanted to kind of break down sort of a fun example, a silly example of a theory of change. So very busy office building. The employees are exhausted, right? Management's realizing everybody's really tired. They're crashing out by like 2 o'clock, staring blankly at spreadsheets. And they recognize that there is a need. Employees are tired, disengaged, and staring blankly at spreadsheets by 2 p.m. And they want to, oops, could we go back to the last slide, please? Thank you. So they want to create change, right? So they developed this theory of change. If exhausted employees are provided free coffee, then workplace productivity, collaboration, and engagement will improve. So again, they recognize this need, right, of employees being tired and disengaged. They want to create an intended change here. So they're really clear about it. They want to create a more energized, productive, and collaborative workplace. And then in order to make that change happen, they have to describe that pathway of change. So basically, free coffee creates an increased sense of employee appreciation and likelihood of gathering in shared spaces that facilitate informal conversation and collaboration, thus leading to more engaged and productive staff. It's really important to identify some of the assumptions. Here we have a causal assumption, but we could probably also think of some contextual and operational assumptions as well. Providing coffee to employees improves productivity, casual gathering for interaction, and improves workplace culture. So that's the assumption that we're making about coffee and its impact on employee productivity. And then obviously the role of the organization here is to create those conditions, to provide the funding for the coffee program, to provide the facilities, to provide the areas where folks can come together, collaborate, talk informally, and maybe eventually create more formal connection. I agree, free coffee is wonderful. I work remotely, so the coffee is not always free here, but I wish it was. So that is really, breaking down the components of a theory of change in a very simplistic example to describe how are we basically coming up with how the need, identifying the need, the change we want to make, the pathway that we're getting to see that change happen, the assumptions that we need to understand about how the change is going to happen, and then the role our organization has to make that change occur. Next slide, please. So to build a theory of change, just sort of recapping on what we were just talking about, and you can really think about this within the context of your organization. Identify the need of your target population. For CEO, we have folks that are reentering. This is a very vulnerable time for them, right? This is a time where they are in high need of a lot of resources. So name that intended change your org intends to make. We want to provide them with resources to allow them to maintain employment, to help them get some stability during this vulnerable period. Hypothesize the anticipated pathway to change. How is that change happening? What are some assumptions that you can make, that your organization makes, about how whatever you're providing to your folks, how is that going to create change for them? What are some of the external things that you can't really change, but you need to continue to assume are going to be there? And what are some of the things as an organization that you have to assume have to exist in order to help create that change? And then determine the role of your organization in creating that intended change. Are you going to be the one that's funding it? Do you need external funders? Are you a partner? How are you coming together with others to make sure that this change is happening, or are you really sort of the main vehicle driver of that change? So I don't know if we have extra time, but I'm happy to take questions if we do, and if not, we can also hold questions till after Noelle's section coming up too. I'm fine with either way. But thank you all for the time, and I was really excited to get a chance to share this with you.
Thanks, Em. We'll have about 4 minutes for questions.
And just saying in the chat, can you clarify the difference between when you say assumptions, sometimes we mean negative things, but in this case, I think you mean positive things. Can you just clarify that from what we're seeing in the chat?
I'm having a hard time hearing you, but I think I know what you're asking based on the chat. So yes, assumptions can be positive things, right? They are just sort of neutral. They're just things that we know exist related to, like, the causal assumptions. We know, hopefully, our assumption is that A is going to cause B, right? We're going to provide folks with coffee. It's going to allow them to have more alertness, more productivity. The contextual are things that may or may not, that exist stably within their environment that we can't control. So we think about our coffee example, the coffee supply. Maybe something happens with the supply chain and coffee is no longer available, but we just always sort of assume that Folgers will operate and exist. Coffee will be there. And then organizationally, their assumptions are that there are things that the organization has to provide in order for the assumptions about how they're going to have their intended impact is going to occur. So that means, they're going to assume they have the funding to provide the coffee. They're going to assume that that the employees want the coffee. Participants probably could really want some coffee too. So any other questions about clarifying those? Hope I see some more questions in here. Does your theory of change need to be original, or can it be general in the space? Adam, would you mind expanding a little bit more on what you mean by that?
I mean, I think sometimes I see people getting a little bit too cute, trying to create an original theory of change when there's a lot of work that's already been done, and we're basically using someone else's model anyway. I'm just wondering how that's accepted in the space.
I think it's really important for your organization to have a clear understanding of what it is that you do. And sure, that may look similar to what other orgs are doing, right? But I think it's really important not just, to say, like, this is what we intend to do and other people are doing similar work, but it serves more to, like, align you organizationally with folks that are both, internal as well as external. Like when you are trying to talk to funders, for example, about what it is that you do, it provides a really clear statement about your impact. And so it may look and sound like others. And sure, you may look at examples and be like, this sounds like a really great one for us. But ultimately, it's really important to kind of do that thought work within your organization to develop your own unique theory of change, even though it may look like others who are doing similar work.
We have a raised hand from Karen.
Hi, I'm wondering if it's possible to sort of reverse engineer this in terms of the assumptions and how you can lead a presumed theory of change to something that is more relevant and more real. The example I'm thinking of is, oftentimes we in workforce hear from people who believe, because of surveys, because of their involvement in the community, that returning citizens just want to work. because work to them is dignity, is a restoration of their dignity. And that if they could do that, then all other things will be solved because they're working, they're back to work. When in fact, the truth might be so far from that. It might be work is way down the list of things that you need to do. You may need to be healthy first. You may need to have a roof over your head first. You may need to do several other things before you're in a position to sustain a job, right? And so the assumptions that people make about themselves that transfer into what other folks believe because they're hearing it from the source may actually not be true or valid. And so when we talk about assumptions leading to a theory of change, I'm wondering if when I say can it be reverse engineered so that, and to get to uncover what is real and true.
That's a great point. And I think, we have to think in terms of assumptions is not necessarily making assumptions about what folks need. It's really the assumptions are about how are we assuming that our work is making an impact, right? So whether that could be very broad. It's like we are providing folks who are returning resources so that they can have stability and that they're able to meet their needs. And I think the assumption there is that as an organization, we are able to do that well. And how we're going to do it, that's sort of you iron out those steps a little bit further. And Welly will talk about a logic model, which will really kind of, I think, concretize some of what I'm talking about. But I think, in terms of the assumptions are not necessarily making assumptions about our participants, but it's about what our program is going to do to impact those folks. And needs can vary. And it's just more about understanding the assumption around your impact, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would still say that would still hold true for me. I would still ask the same question because there are many people in workforce because they're delivered to you. Well, your mission is to go find them work, is to make sure that they can do that. But then you get to, this is what you're resourced to do. This is what your staff is trained to do. But it doesn't mean it's going to lead to success if some other things don't happen first, right? That assumptions piece is really powerful and it can go in a right direction, but it can also go in a wrong direction.
Well, thank you so much, Karen, and thank you, Em, for your wonderful presentation. We'll have we're going to go ahead and move on to our next section, but continue to engage in the chat. We'll have more time for Q&A later on today. All right, everyone. Thank you all so much for learning. And now is the time for classwork. Next slide, please. So today we're going to be working on goal statements, which are very related to theories of change. So earlier in your breakout, you reflected on key goals, and now you're going to do that with your teams, and then develop a goal statement. And I'm going to talk or explain a little bit more about how we do that today as we click into an action plan. And bear with me, I'm going to try to do this quickly so that you all have as much time as possible with your teams. Jassy, are you able to share that? If not, I can. Okay, thanks. I know, might take a little second. All right, so as we scroll down, the first part of the activity. So in the table there, we have different impact areas, program engagement, employment and economic mobility, and so on. And so we want you to just brainstorm with your team. What are some of your goals across those areas for the first part of the activity? And then for the second part, we're building a goal statement. Oh, I'm sorry. And so on the next page for that first part, there's a bank of different impacts. that you all can use as inspiration if you need. Next page. And so for the second part of the activity, we're going through building a goal statement. And so in short, this will be a one-sentence statement that captures the impact that you want to make. So the first part of that statement on the top row is thinking about your target population. The second row is the place that you want to make impact. The third row is the short-term outcome, which will be pretty much one of those impacts that you brainstormed earlier in the first part of the activity. And then the result is like the long-term change that you want to make. And then scroll down, you really just put those pieces together and you have a goal statement. All right, that was the overview of the activity, and now we're ready to move into breakout rooms.
Oh, wait. I'm still doing it wrong now? Wait.
Hillary, I think DeMarcus might be having some internet issues if you want to maybe kick off the next section.
Yeah, I can definitely kick us off. I hope everybody had a really great, productive chat in their breakout rooms. And just a reminder that we're always here, with the CEO and the RFA teams by email if you all have questions in between sprint sessions or outside of the sprint. And you're also welcome to post on the Results Network if you have a question for your peers and other teams on the sprint. So we're going to go back to our presenters now. And this next section is going to feature Noelle Drummond, who's going to share with us more about program evaluation. So I'll turn over the mic to her.
Hi, everyone. Sorry. There. Hi, everyone. I'm Noelle Drummond. I'm going to move this out of my way. So I wanted to start with just a really basic question with everyone. So either through the chat or through emoji reactions, how many of you are familiar with program evaluation? We've got some experts. I love that. All right, so I guess that's the end of my talk. No, I'm just kidding. But so today I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about program evaluation. And I also just want to invite everyone, if you have any questions just in general about program evaluation, or if you want me to, go into depth to anything else, just please come off mute or go in the chat and I'll make sure to devote time to any springing questions that you have. So before I worked at CO, I was an actual program evaluator. So part of my role was always explaining to people what actually program evaluation is. And so just really getting us started with program evaluation, as many of you already know, is a way to understand what we are doing with our program. Really, I like to say, program evaluations help us understand if we did the thing, right? Did we do the thing that we set out to do? So do we know if it's working? Do we know if it's not working? Do we know if people are actually getting what we want them to get from it, or are they finding new struggles along the way? And ultimately, program evaluation helps us improve our program. So really thinking about just how do we know that we're doing what we set out to do? And through program evaluation and through asking questions using data, we can feel more confident from just guessing or hoping to knowing what is the impact that we've had. Just like a quick example, right? Sort of something that we look at. If participants stop showing up after 30 days in our program, right? We're going to ask ourselves, what's happening? And so through program evaluation, we can actually start to ask questions like, did people stop showing up because they couldn't get here, right? Are we located in the right space? What times are the bus schedules? Is transportation an issue? Are people just not engaging with us, right? Did we drop the ball somewhere? Are we contacting them appropriately? Maybe is case size too high, right? Thinking about the staff. Do I have one staff member with 150 people? That's crazy high. We don't want that. So just really thinking about what are the questions, how are we going to measure, and are we really setting up our program for success. So really, program evaluation moves us from guessing to being more certain about what we set out to do. Are there any questions about what program evaluation is just off the start? I'm assuming silence is golden, so I will keep going. So next slide, please. So in order to be able to do program evaluation or to evaluate your program, you have to have data, or you want to use data-backed decision making. And I always want to demystify data, right? A lot of the times people think that you need this entire infrastructure and you need like 15,000 like surveys to be able to say something about your program. I really want everyone to sort of leave at least some of my talk with this idea that everything is data. I can look at everyone right here, those who are on camera, those who are off camera, counting that's data for me. I can see looking at the number of emojis in terms of reactions, that's data for me. Everything is data and everything can tell you something about your program. So there's two types of data that we oftentimes will use, and you'll hear some of that verbiage a lot. It's quantitative and qualitative. So quantitative is numbers, right? Thinking about your participants, you're probably wanting to gather, did they get placed, right? That's a binary, yes or no. Attendance, how many times did they show up? That's a quantitative, that's a number that you get. How much are people getting paid once they get a job? All of those are quantitative. I'm just gonna ask, oh, I have a question already, Tiffany?
No, ma'am, I was trying to give qualitative data in the chat about being familiar with program evaluation.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I love that. Thank you for that qualitative data. So oftentimes quantitative is the easiest for us to collect, right? The very simple bam, bam, bam. We get a scale from 1 to 5, 4, someone who gives 4, 3, 2, 1, and we'll start to make interpretations. And there's another form of data called qualitative data, and that's experience and stories, right? That's when you talk to people, you're interviewing them, you're getting participant feedback, or staff are observing what's happening. I like to think about qualitative does take a little bit of more time and more effort. If you think about collecting that information, then transcribing it and trying to make meaning of it, it's a little bit harder. It takes a lot more effort, but it does tell you a rich story. I can tell you with quantitative data, 10 people showed up to my meeting, right? Or I could tell you 2 groups, 10 people actually got a placement, 3 got another placement, and they've showed up maybe 10 times. What I can't tell you with quantitative data is what was the quality of that. What did they talk about? What all of those sort of like rich details of what's happening comes from qualitative. And I'm biased. I think mixed methods is usually the best. So having quantitative and qualitative together really give you a really rich idea of what's happening in your program. So just like sort of a fun quiz, can anybody give me examples of quantitative data that they have easy access to right now in their program? I have some stuff on the side if you guys want some cheat codes.
Looks like Eddie's hand is raised.
Nope.
Hi. So I can tell you that as far as quantitative data goes, I can tell you the numbers of justice impacted students in our organization that are getting their degrees, right? Like how many enrolled and how many got their degrees. But in the middle, let's say somebody falls through the cracks and they don't get their degree, okay? That number will be reflected. But what the qualitative research is going to do is going to tell me why that person was not able to finish across the line. And there's the gaps where we can then say, after doing an interview with that student, find out what their needs were. Was it because they had some financial, or maybe it was transportation getting to school? That's the difference between interviewing them and then just having the numbers. The stories actually tell us meaning behind the numbers.
Yeah, I love that example too. There's a lot of rich things that we can sort of delve into, but you're looking at like the numbers told you something, right? The number of people who made progress to a certain part of your story or part of your program. But then the why behind that really came from like talking to people and getting that qualitative. And oftentimes the impact is oftentimes told in those qualitative experience and stories. So one of the things that we did is just like things that could be easily tracked, right? Attendance, text messaging, survey responses, case notes, how many times they went to an appointment or missed an appointment. All of this is data. And all of this we can track either on a spreadsheet or we can track them just as we are, writing down case notes and making sure it's sort of systematic in the way that we do it. But everything is data. So one thing that I want us to leave with is everything is data, and everything could be really useful in us understanding our program. Justin?
I just posted in the chat area an image of quantitative, basically, that of all the services that we provide and what demographics are impacted by those programs. So I was adding to the conversation. That's all.
I love that. See? But before we move on, I just wanted to just make sure, I used to be a professor before this. So quantitative, qualitative, do we feel comfortable in knowing what they are? Awesome. And also just remembering everything is data. I'm going to pop in maybe 3 sessions from now and I'm going to ask everybody what data is. So everything is data. And so when you have data, so the next slide, please. It's really important that we think about, okay, now that we have that data, what do we do with it? Yeah, we are data, but meaningful evaluations can be simple. You don't need a team. You don't need, a dedicated analyst to already be collecting data. Things like counts, number of people attending, number of people completing, how long people take in your program, longitudinal data, right? In January, we had 10 people attend and 5 people get a job. In February, we had 3 and 7. All of that is count data, but it's still really meaningful data. So even without a dedicated data analyst in your org, there's already stuff that can be collected, and your simple analysis can support your action, your storytelling, and your meaning making. And it's really important in terms of just understanding the impact that your program is having. Next slide. So the difference between a theory of change and a logic model. So if you're going to have a program evaluation, you really want to make sure that you have a really good logic model. Your logic model is based off your theory of change, right? So your theory of change explains why and how change happens, like the way that we think our program is going to have the impact and why we think we're going to have that impact. I like to think about the logic model as a roadmap, right? How that change will be executed. How are we going to accomplish those things? What are we going to lay out in order for us to achieve the ultimate impact that our organization wants to have? It's really important to have a clear logic model because sometimes the impact that we want to have takes years. So there should be small milestones in place so that we know that we're moving in the right direction. And I'm going to give you an example of one. Can you move on to the next slide? So using the sort of like free coffee example, right? Our theory of change is really, if exhausted employees are provided coffee, free is the key word, then workplace productivity, collaboration, and engagement will improve, right? That's what we think is going to happen. Coffee will lead to better productivity, better workplace behaviors, more collaboration. Our logic model has a few pretty standard components, and you'll see this in pretty standard logic model frameworks. You have inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impacts, all really sequential. So they all should go in this order. The inputs are like, what do we need to make the thing happen? Like, what do I need to have that change? So in this example, right, we need money. I need funding. I need I need somewhere for that money to come from where I can get coffee for my program. I actually need supplies, right? I need a coffee machine. I need coffee cups. I need coffee filters. I need someone to do the thing. I need some staff to coordinate the coffee program, and I need a space where the coffee machine should live. So if we think about inputs are the thing that we need in order to be able to do the thing. So that's sort of confusing. Inputs are the things that we need in order to be able to do what we set out to do. The activities are sort of the actions, right? Like, so now that I know the inputs, I know the things that I need, here are the actions that I'm going to do with it. I'm going to provide free coffee for break rooms. I'm going to make sure that I'm communicating with people that there's free coffee for our employees. And, restock coffee supplies regularly, making sure that that's always accessible to people. And then now that we know, okay, this is what I need, these are the actions that we're going to do, the outputs is like, what do we produce, right? This is where quantitative comes in. Usually your outputs are numerical. So the number of coffee stations available, 1, 2, depending on it depends really on what my need is. The number of employees that are drinking my coffee, the cups of coffee consumed per week, and frequency of coffee stations used. You really want your outputs to be, what did we produce, should, in terms of numerical orders. And then outcomes is what was the change, right? We gave people coffee. We saw that a lot of people were drinking it. Did it increase employees' alertness? Did it reduce fatigue during working hours? And then the impact is just a long-term change, right? The overall organization productivity, workplace collaboration, and teamwork. And we're at the Q&A, so I will move us on to question and answer in case there's anything I can help clarify. DeMarcus, I think I move it back to you.
Yeah, we'll just give a quick pause to see if anyone has any questions about anything that Noelle shared. Feel free to raise hand or drop anything in the chat. I know we had some activity earlier.
Everything is very well explained. I mean, I don't have any questions. Everything is so well put together. I'm just sitting here at awe and just taking it all in. Good job.
Thank you, Dr. Watt. I see Tiffany has a question.
Yes, I actually do have a question this time. One of my fellow Change Collective members, Azia, has mentioned that this is great information that could be shared with all organizations of any type, and I do agree. And I did notice, though, when I look in the results network, that the recordings I'm not seeing. Well, when I click on them, it tries to get you to sign in to a Zoom. So are the recordings so that we could kind of go over some of these calls? Are those going to be made available so that we could still kind of get this learning when we want to brush up on it?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Kara.
I was just going to say thank you so much for bringing that up, Tiffany. We are definitely going to make sure that all the recordings are accessible and that you should not be needing to join into a Zoom account. So we'll make sure that that's figured out. And this week we'll be sending an email as we've done in the past on Fridays, just with some reminders and things like that. And I'll be sure to include in there the recordings and where you can access all of that for the previous sessions, including this one.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we wrap up for today? All right, if we could.
This is Ramona.
Oh yeah, go ahead,
I'm
Ramona.
really happy that you covered the logic models, because that was one of the things that we discussed in our meeting on yesterday, that we will start developing and laying out our logic model. And I didn't think of it in terms of developing the logic model preceding the theory of change, right? But I see where, Noli, that you recommend that we develop the theory of change first and then move into our logic model.
Yeah, oftentimes it helps your logic model when you already have an idea of what your impact is. So sometimes I recommend people to actually start backwards. So what is the impact that we're trying to have? And then sort of go from impact to outcome to output to just to sort of test yourself to see if we go this way or if we go this way, does our logic model make sense? But basing your logic model off your theory of change, and then make sure that the impact on your theory of change and the impact on your logic model are aligned. Because ultimately the logic model is supposed to be a concrete example of like how you get to your theory of change.
Yes, yes, yes. So, because normally I'm accustomed to the theory of change being around the organization. But if we look at it from this example or this methodology, you could almost do a theory of change with each project, and then that project will lead to the logic model. I love logic models, right? Because you have a roadmap. But this is the first time that we'll be developing the theory of change first, and then, aligning the logic model with the theory of change. This is the first time that I've heard that theory. Great.
Thank you so much, Ramona and Noelle. And we're glad that the presentation today helped you. We're at time, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Jassy, if you could just launch that exit ticket poll really quickly. And so before you go today, if you could quickly fill out a poll, we want to hear how today's session went. And as I go over these wrap up and reminders. As always, all the session materials, they'll be viewed on the syllabus. In a few days, you'll receive a reminder email that will remind you to complete the session 3 action plan activities, as well as any post readings, which will be posted in the results network. Question and answers from today will be shared in the chat. Questions and answers that were shared in the chat for today in all sessions, they will be compiled in the results network, and we'll be sending a link out to that as well, so you can review those at your leisure. And if you're adding new team members, just remember to email us at citysolutions@results4america. And with that, we are done for the day. Please be sure to complete the poll, and you are free to leave. We will see you next week. Thank you all so much.